of the City of Virginia Beach is now in session. This is our formal meeting format. At this time, I ask that all my colleagues and everyone in attendance please silence their electronic devices and phones. I ask my colleagues to please acknowledge their presence on the voting board. And please note in the minutes that Mrs. McLeod is absent this evening due to a work obligation that requires her to be out of town. At this time, I'm asking everyone to join me in a moment of silence. Please rise as you're able for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. We will now proceed with our awards and recognitions. Mrs. Weems.
Yes, thank you. The PTA National Reflections winner. Our first recognition is for a student who placed at the national level in the 2018 PTA Reflections Contest. Please welcome Great Neck Middle School 8th grade student Aaron Bailey. The PTA started Reflections 50 years ago to celebrate the arts. Aaron won an Award of Excellence in the middle school division in the dance category, one of 6 categories. Keeping with the 2018 contest theme of Within Reach, Aaron choreographed and performed a dance to the reggae song One Day, which is about wishing for world peace and unity. In her dance, she used props that complemented her interpretation of the theme that one day people will get along and coexist. A dancer for 10 years, Aaron has performed in the Richmond's Ballet's Nutcracker and is also a founding member as well as the instructor in her school's dance club. I just wish that we could see the dance. Aaron, do you mind just doing it for us real quick? I would love to see it. Next time we're going to have to plan that. But please join me in congratulating Aaron on her notable achievement. Thank you.
Next, the school board is proud to recognize 2 of Virginia's 4 finalists for the 2018 Presidential Award for Excellence in Mathematics and Science Teaching. Please welcome Old Donation School 3rd grade teacher Melissa Fallon and Holland Elementary School math specialist Allison Krischer. This award, which is administered by the National Science Foundation on behalf of the White House, is regarded as the nation's top honor for mathematics and science teachers. Krischer and Fallon were selected as finalists by a Virginia Department of Education committee that evaluated the applications of nominated teachers from across the Commonwealth. They now advance to compete at the national level with nominees from across the 50 states, the District of Columbia, the Commonwealth of Puerto Rico, Department of Defense activity schools, and U.S. territories. The final honorees will be announced by the President next year. Congratulations on this notable distinction. Mrs. Chairwoman, this concludes this evening's recognitions.
Dr. Spence, we're ready for the superintendent's report.
Thank you, and good evening, Chairwoman Anderson, Vice Chair McDonald, members of the board. You know, in our school division and in our schools, we consistently talk about the power and importance of building relationships with our students, to create within our buildings the places where children know they can come and be cared for and be welcomed. All too often, people think of this work as solely the teacher's job in the classroom. And while there is no denying that work happens routinely with our teachers, we also know that anyone, regardless of their job description, can make a difference in the life of a child. Take, for example, our compass keeper tonight, Kempsville Middle School custodian Robert Brown. Robert begins his day tending to the needs of the building, keeping the school clean and ready for staff and students. And he also uses his time during the day to seek out students who may need a word of encouragement or follow up with those who have homework to complete or more studying to do. A football and basketball coach, he has helped to mentor hundreds of student athletes, including some who have gone on to win national championships or play professional ball. Whether on the field or in the halls, at the heart of his work, he wants to let kids know he's there to help. Let's take a moment to hear a little bit more about Coach Brown.
Hey, Robert.
When I come to work, it's a happy place. You got to come somewhere that you want to be, and this is where I want to be. I get the job done. If I see something that needs to be done, I got to get it done. All these kids needed somebody to listen to them, and that's what I try to do.
I often wish that I could hire him as a school counselor. I say because he exemplifies and has all the characteristics that I would look for in someone that would work for me in my school counseling department. It's that empathy, it's that caring, it's that a kid that's really struggling. And that kid needs to find an adult in this building that they can speak to or someone that they trust. It's all about trust. When a student in our building can go to an adult in this building that they trust and talk to, I think that's a win.
These kids, you don't know what they've been through the night before. So when they first get here, they like, you don't know if they ate, you don't know if they're having a bad day, you don't know any. But once I get that trust in that kid, whatever kind of day they're having, they'll bring it out. They'll talk to me about it.
Coach Brown, he's really a helpful person and stuff. Like, if you need to talk to somebody, he'll be there to talk to you every morning. He'll like tell you good morning and stuff. Like, if you're having a bad day, you can go to him and talk to him for advice.
When they're in middle school, it's like a transition between a kid and a child. When they have somebody they can easily talk to if you're having a bad day, it's always really nice to have.
He affects like the whole school. Like, I think every school should have like a Coach Brown. Like, this, without him, this school would be way different. He takes time out of his day to help people. Like, he could be in the middle of doing his job and then he'll just like stop doing that to help someone.
I have a heart for people. I have a big heart for people. Just like tonight, after football practice today at 6, I got to get to Kempsville High School because some of our kids go to Tallwood, some of our kids go to Kempsville. So they play tonight. So I done had over 100 calls, Coach, are you coming to the game? So what I would do is I would go sit on Kempsville side for the first half and Tallwood side for the second half. And then make sure everybody sees me. They would call you out. They would say, Coach, you sat on their side, didn't even sit on the outside. And there's nothing about the outcome of the game. It's just that they see me at the game.
If I had to describe him in one word, I would say caring, because I haven't seen him turn down a student. I haven't seen him turn down a parent. He's always willing to give whatever is necessary to ensure that the families as well as the kids get what they need.
So Kempsville Middle Principal Patty Jenkins, who's here with us tonight, shared that the same care that Robert shows for all of the students, he also extends to staff at Kempsville Middle, making sure his family's taken care of. And I think we certainly got a sense of that tonight. My favorite line, I think, was the young man who said, you know, every school needs a Coach Brown. And we're fortunate to have a Coach Brown in Virginia Beach. He's here with us today. Coach, could you please stand so we could recognize you? I do want to also point out that Mr. Pellerin from Kempsville Middle is joining us tonight, as is Coach Brown's brother, Mike Brown, and his mother, Juanita Davis. If you all could just raise your hands so we could say thank you as well. You know, listening to those students, Coach, it's clear the impact that you're having on them at this really important stage in their life that the young man spoke about. And I want to thank you for being that strong presence for them. As you said about going to the game, it really isn't about winning or losing. It's about showing up and being there. And you show up for our kids on a daily basis, and so we just want to say thank you. To see Coach Brown's story again, we encourage you to visit our blog, The Core, and where you'll also find stories about our other Compass Keepers, as always. Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. That completes my report.
Thank you, Dr. Spence. Madam Clerk, do we have any speakers on agenda items this evening?
No, ma'am.
Thank you. The chair will entertain a motion to approve the minutes of our September 11th meeting. Mrs. Rye has made the motion. Mrs. Holtz has seconded. The voting board is open. Yellow button.
It's on. That's right.
It's noted that Mrs. Manning and Mr. Edwards abstained due to their absence from the meeting. Is that correct? Yes. Okay. And it's also noted that this is the first time in 18 years that you've missed a meeting. Mr. Edwards? All right, thank you. Next is the adoption of the agenda, and one of our colleagues has asked that item D4, Policy 7-43, fundraising by students, be removed from the consent agenda and moved to action. If there is no objection, I will move that item from consent, and it will become action item B. The chair will entertain a motion to adopt the agenda as amended. Motion is made by Ms. Manning, seconded by Mrs. Felton. The voting board is open. The consent agenda has a resolution for Dyslexia Awareness Month. Mrs. Holtz, please read the resolution for us.
Resolution for Dyslexia Awareness Month, October 2018. Whereas dyslexia is a language-based learning disability that causes difficulties with reading, writing, spelling, and word pronunciation, and whereas the onset and severity of dyslexia varies for each individual, and whereas it takes individuals with dyslexia longer to process phonemic information, thus affecting academic growth, achievement, and self-esteem. And whereas it is important to provide effective teaching approaches and educational intervention strategies for individuals with dyslexia, and whereas Dyslexia Awareness Month is an opportunity to acknowledge educators utilizing effective teaching strategies and to celebrate the many achievements of adolescents, students, and adults with dyslexia. And whereas the School Board of the City of Virginia Beach is committed to a continued focus on educating students, parents, and school staff about effective teaching strategies to address the needs of students with learning disabilities, now therefore be it resolved that the School Board of the City of Virginia Beach designates the month of October to be Dyslexia Awareness Month, and be it further resolved that strategies and interventions to address the needs of the students with learning disabilities be ongoing in Virginia Beach City Public Schools, and be it further resolved that a copy of this resolution be spread across the official minutes of this board.
Thank you, Mrs. Holtz. Also on the consent agenda this evening is item B, the budget calendar for fiscal year 2019-20. Item C, religious exemptions. And item D, which contains the policy recommendations for policy 3-89, general contract and execution, policy 6-3, special education, and policy 7-36, soliciting from school personnel. The chair will entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda. Mrs. Holtz has made the motion, seconded by Mrs. Rye. The voting board is open. I did it again. I think I'm just going to change the names over here. Seconded by Mrs. Riggs. Voting board is open. Thank you. The consent agenda has been approved. Under action this evening, the chair will entertain a motion to approve the personnel report. Motion is made by Mr. Edwards, seconded by Ms. Melnick. Is there any discussion? The voting board is open. Motion is passed. The chair will entertain a motion to approve policy 7-43. The motion is made by Mrs. Holt, seconded by Ms. Melnick. Is there any discussion? Mrs. Manning.
I would like to make a substitute motion. I've made a copy. It's not very long, but I thought I would make a copy so that everyone could read it. And it includes the current proposed policy. So my substitute motion is that we make 2 changes to the current proposed policy that is being presented this evening. I'll wait for everybody to get a copy. Hopefully I have enough. Here comes one more. So on item 9 in the proposed policy, it discusses fundraising through crowdsourcing or online fundraising programs must have prior approval from the principal with consultation from the Office of Business Services and/or the Department of Media and Communications. I just want to take out the end there, and I'll discuss why during our discussion time. And then I would like to add item 12. A disclosure must be provided with any solicitation request stating what percentage of the donations or funds raised will be kept by the school. That's my substitute motion.
Do you have a second?
Second.
Okay, the motion is to remove item 9. It says remove and/or Department of Media Communications. And then also to add on item 12, a disclosure must be provided with any solicitation request stating that percentage of the donations of funds raised will be kept by the school. Is there any other discussion? Mr. Edwards?
Go ahead.
Concerned with putting in a percentage figure is that the costs to execute a fundraiser vary from one type to another significantly, and the percentage going back to the school will vary based on certainly some small part is driven by the profit margin of the third party that might be producing the event, but more significantly is the expenses of it, whether it be a run or skipping rope, or there's an incredible array of different, all of which cost different things. So I'm afraid that percentage could paint an inappropriately unfavorable reaction to the school community that if they didn't if all they saw was that number.
Thank you, Mr. Edwards. Ms. Manning?
I appreciate that point, and I'll be open to maybe a change in wording. The reason that I want to include this is because over the last year, I have received, and I think many board members have received, concerns about third-party fundraising organizations who are receiving 60% of cash donations that are coming into our schools. And I did not even, I had heard that through rumor mill. I didn't know. I requested a copy of the contract. I was told I could not have a copy of the contract because it's between the PTA and the third-party fundraising organization, which concerned me because I, as a school board member, have no idea of what is in that contract at one of our schools.
So I'd just like to stop you there for just a moment, because this does not, this motion, 7-43, does not give guidelines for PTA.
This is
isn't that
but
correct?
this is a fundraiser by students, and that's
Right, this is by students, i.e. like SCA. This is in school. This has nothing to do with the PTA.
this fundraiser was in school during the school day.
For PTA.
It was a PTA
Right, but
event during the
this
school
does
days
not- this-
that
I
students
have
were
to rule
soliciting
this-
funds.
Okay, but
Cammie,
this is not
Lynette.
about PTA.
this is about students fundraising. Okay,
You do
I'll say
not-
students.
You don't have a policy that deals, you have a policy that deals with PTA. You don't have one that deals with PTA funding, because clearly a contract between the PTA and a third party would not be something you would rule on. This fundraising by students, depending on if the PTA was using students to do some of the fundraising, that might fall
Yeah.
under there. Or it could be students, the French club is selling candy bars, something like that, or cookies at this point. So it depends on the nature of the activity. There are times when some PTA activities can involve students during the school day involvement, and that would fall under this policy.
Okay, so may I proceed, Madam Chair?
So, but am I correct that this does not tell PTA what to do?
What would happen if you were to make the amendment that Mrs. Manning is suggesting, if the PTA wants to use students to do fundraising, your policy is going to require that fundraising activity, you have to give some information about the percentage back to it. It wouldn't necessarily control what the PTA did do it. PTA would just have to understand if they're going to use students to do that, they will have to then publicize that, whatever your final wording's.
And this would be the
Okay.
appropriate place to address that concern, correct?
It would be one of the
If
places you
students
could do
are,
that,
if
yes.
students are fundraising, which they are in this case.
This would be one of the policies you could address, and you could also address new business services manual on.
Okay, so may I proceed?
Yes.
Okay, so I did receive a copy of the contract by one of these third-party fundraising organizations and did find out that they do keep 60% of the cash donations. And I don't want to prohibit that, but I want for it to be disclosed to parents and donors who are giving their money to the schools, and they need to know how the money is being spent.
If you're going to talk about being spent, may I suggest there's a difference between being spent and being
Or donated.
coming back there. And what one concern I had is disclosure about what's being kept by the schools. As Mr. Edwards indicated, there's usually an administrative cost. Quite honestly, 40% return is actually typical in the fundraising areas. That's not unusual. But that 40% that come back to you, you may have had admin costs that you need to do. You were keeping freezers going, you were selling things. You might have other costs that sometimes you're sharing some of those costs for other things. So you may want to be a little bit clear as to what you want there. Also, and if I'm correct, and Kate, maybe she may be able to answer this question for me, but I think when you put in a fundraising request, you're supposed to tell the principal what it is you're anticipating. I'm hoping to make $5,000 of this. Not that you will, but there's some anticipation as to what you're doing. I'm wondering whether some of your concern is how much do you anticipate making. If you were to say you're only keeping 40%, that may sound, as Mr. Edwards is concerned, inappropriate, but that's actually typical for most fundraisers. A 40% return is actually fairly good. What is it, how much, you may be keeping 40%, but if you're making $15,000 off of a carnival, that may be a significant amount.
Okay, so and maybe we should put this in a different category. This is with cash donations where there is no overhead, where the school is not putting out expenses. This is a fundraising organization coming in. It's their own expenses. They are keeping 60% of the cash donations. The school is getting 40%. It's cut and dry. There's no other administrative costs associated with that. And I just want that to be disclosed to the donors.
Mrs. Rye? Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. McDonald. I didn't have her name up there, but I saw her.
Thank you. So, as a former PTA treasurer, I am adamantly opposed to disclosure statements going on solicitation materials. It isn't common practice in the nonprofit sector, which I also work in. There's an understanding that there's a cost associated to fundraising. If people are truly interested in what that margin is, PTAs often publish, and I think they're required to by their own bylaws and such, to publish their their financial statements and budgets. When I was on the PTA, we would budget for the year. We would have a goal for the amount of money we wanted to raise for programs that we were giving to the school, and we selected fundraisers to accomplish that goal. In my view, again, coming as former PTA treasurer and working in the nonprofit sector, I don't care how much money it takes to raise the amount of money to accomplish the goals that I have. In fact, if you really research highly successful nonprofit fundraisers, you might be astonished at the amount of money that goes to for-profit businesses to help them achieve those goals. And you might be astonished at how many nonprofits have been hurt by attitudes that go along with this suggestion to say that we shouldn't be paying out money to these for-profit businesses that help nonprofits accomplish their goals, because nonprofits often can't accomplish them on their own. So this is just not appropriate at all. And as far as number 9, I want to ask the members of the Policy Review Committee or legal counsel to discuss why there's an and/or Department of Media and Communications, what the reasoning was there.
I'm not sure we actually discussed this, but as the one that drafted, I can tell you why I wrote this in there. I think sometimes if it's something where the business services, a contract might come through business services where they would look at, they might fill in on it. But sometimes, again, you have these, sometimes a PTA or booster club may not do something that it requires a contract that the school division would sign, but it might reflect adversely on there, or, so they might be wording something that we wouldn't necessarily want to say it that way. It's not how we say in schools, in which case you might want to run it through media and communications. Is this how we want to say this? Is this the appropriate term for schools to use? But it wouldn't go through business services, because business services isn't going to look at a contract between the booster club and, the cookie dough company coming out. So that's why we put it that way on there. There might be times when it does actually have to look at both of them, but certainly there are times when students are selling things for organizations for which business services is not responsible for the contract.
So if I'm understanding correctly, if it's a matter in which there's actually a contract with the school, business services would be involved. But if it was with an autonomous organization that's the school's not processing the contract, such as a PTA, the business services would not be involved.
Correct. It wouldn't go through my office, wouldn't go through Mrs. Pate's office. It would just simply go there. Sometimes the principal may be aware of it, but that doesn't come down for the administration to sign.
Okay, thank you.
So to be clear on that, basically, the reason it says and/or, just for my clarification purposes or our clarification purposes, so that if something is worded, so that it's worded properly, more or less. Is that correct?
Yes, and there's sometimes some activities you don't, like we put into charitable gaming. Let's say somebody decided to do a bingo thing out there or something like that. And then this particular one has to do with crowdsourcing, but you were saying online bingo. We don't support charitable gaming type of thing. So we might have to say, not good for us. We don't want to run that through the school division on there, because it's not a business services issue. It is something we don't support on that. And that meeting communications would also deal with some of the wording type of issues we might be concerned about, or how we get the information out to students. Sometimes meeting communications looks at the notices and publications as they go out to the students and their families.
Thank you. Ms. Weems?
Yeah, on number 3, the limited use of instructional time. So what does limited mean? So are these fundraisers taking place that the kids are involved with during school?
You have to look to administration.
Well, why was that put in there? And why was it limited use? Why are we using any time?
Mrs. Weems, you need to speak to the substitute motion only at this time.
Okay. Because
I think the substitute motion is only for number 9 and number 12.
well, it's including everything, but it's changing those. Well, okay, I can ask in another. I was just curious. If you want to.
We'll be back to the main motion if this one.
Okay, and number 9, what is crowdsourcing? Am I allowed to ask that? I don't know what that is.
You're going to ask me. I'll quite honestly, my knowledge goes mostly to Shark Tank, so that's how I know most of this.
I can probably.
But it's online. It's basically, I'll let Dr. Spencer handle that.
I think, and I'll be honest, this is the one that I think is going to cause the most interest amongst our teachers. I would say something like Donors Choose is a crowdsourcing site.
What?
Donors Choose is a crowdsourcing site. So crowdsourcing is when you go online and you attempt to get additional funding from other people for a project that you're working on.
Oh.
typically through a website or social media. But the one I think that's going to be most common for teachers is going to be DonorsChoose.org.
Okay. And then I kind of take a different take on this than you. I'm going to have to respectfully disagree on the amount. Last night, I'm a den leader for a Cub Scout pack, and we got our popcorn fundraising stuff last night, so I'll be glad to sell y'all some popcorn. But right on the top, and something this big, it said Scouts get to keep 70% of this fundraiser. I, as a parent, love to see that, and I have bought so much wrapping paper and cookie dough and everything else there is in schools, and I would actually ask, or I would know, and if the fundraiser was not a good profit, I would just write a check. I would tell my child, we're not buying the candy bar, selling the candy bars, we're not taking the wrapping paper, I'm not going to give, this much money, and then the school only get the small portion of it. I'll just write a check. So to me, that is very helpful as a parent, and I love getting that thing last night with the Scouts, because I'm like, yay, my $50 bucket of popcorn that I'm going to buy, 70% of it's going to the Scouts. So I don't see why, I think that parents, and I know these organizations are upfront, and they tell the PTA person right off the bat, you're getting 50% or you're only getting 40% profit. So why can't we be that transparent with the parents that are shelling out the money, or the kids that are having to ask the parents to shell out the money? I want to know where the money's going to. And I've got a nonprofit, and I let people know where the money's going to.
Mrs. Rye?
So the issue comes down to, I think a lot of reasonable people can agree that that is a best practice, but the issue comes down to what's the purview of of school board policy. And PTA, the fact they're a separate entity, they're a separate legal entity, they have their own bylaws, their own insurance, and it's been pretty much a very successful relationship. Our school board policy 731, community relations. The superintendent shall encourage principals to cooperate with PTAs in mutual activities. We have principals and we have terrific PTA presidents. And, some of us up here have been PTA presidents, some more than once, president company included. And so, like I said, I want to emphasize the partnership role and the fact that we can agree it's a best practice. We can trust our PTAs, I think, to consider this. And there was added language to, broad language about considering the best financial return. Parents always are free to provide input to, the whole school community input, consult with your board members, your PTA president or board members if you have strong opinions about fundraising. That's what I would encourage. The other thing I wanted to just remind everybody is that not every school has an army of volunteers, and even within schools it could vary. A school that's very rich in volunteers one year may be lacking the next year, and so we want to to try and hamstring that flexibility. There is a price to pay for hassle-free. And these other companies that are in business, you contract with your eyes open. And so these are the reasons why the policy committee came to the conclusion that this is not our purview. It's the purview of the PTA, a separate entity. Like I said, we will encourage them to consider best practices, to consider their own state and national bylaws, and to take surveys among their community of parents. Fundraising has come a long way since I was last a president, and there's other considerations to factor in today more than ever about, involving the community, making it a community event. And I trust that all these considerations will be part of those discussions.
Thank you. Mrs. Riggs?
I want to piggyback on what Mr. I just said. First of all, I don't think that we should be tying the hands of the PTA as much as they have done for the schools and the students and the programs that they have provided. To do this would help tie those hands. And I'm going to date myself without having to look at me, you can tell. I wasn't the president, but I was what they used to call the Ways and Means chair for many years at Woodstock. Actually, I worked with Ed Jones. He was the president of that PTA. And I would have loved to have something of this nature available to us because we worked very hard. We were lucky to have the volunteers, but as Carolyn said, there is a limited amount. There are some schools that they have a hard time just getting the president and the vice president. So to be able to do something of this with the fundraising, I do not think we should tie their hands anymore than they already have with other policies. I think that this is not her, they're not going to do anything that is underhanded. And if somebody wants to know, they can certainly call and find out and talk to the officers, the president, whoever it may be, of the PTA, if that's, or whatever organization is raising that money.
Thank you, Ms. Riggs. Ms. Weems?
I was just say that I am in no way, not at all, close to insinuating that PTA is doing anything underhanded. So I just wanted to clear that up. And in fact, I'm a great supporter of PTA, and we've got PTAers in the audience. Thank you. And it's a great organization. I support PTA 100%. And so in no way, just because I want parents to know where their money's going, that does not reflect at all any negative opinion of PTA, and I thank you for all the parents and teachers and students that are involved in this great organization. So I just wanted to make that clear.
Thank you. Mr. McDonald?
Madam Chair, I call the question.
Okay, the question has been called for. So if you are in favor of the substitute motion, you will oh, we vote on call the question. We need 2/3. Is that correct?
No, I think call, you just call.
That's what I thought.
Call
the question, we just immediately vote now, right? Right. So we're voting on the substitute motion of policy 7-43, and that would be to remove the and/or Department of Media Communications, and also to add 12 as a disclosure must be provided with any solicitation request stating what percentage of the donations or funds raised will be kept by the school. Voting board is open. The motion has failed. We are back to the original motion of 7-43 as provided to us without these additions. So is there any discussion? Ms. Manning?
Yeah, I would just like to say that the first call I made on this topic was to the local PTA president who's in charge of the PTA in this area. Unfortunately, I was not able to reach her, and I am in no way trying to tie the hands of our PTA. And that's why I didn't want to remove that opportunity for our PTA to conduct these fundraisers in our schools, which a lot of parents asked me to do. I just want full disclosure. I just want our parents, and as students are going around knocking on doors, asking people for money, the students aren't going to have that answer to tell them, oh, our school only gets 40% of these funds, and the parents, and they're not going to know who to call to get that information. So I just want full disclosure.
I need to rule you out of order. We have already voted on that motion.
Well, this is still part of the...
No, now it's not a part of it. We voted no.
Okay, that's fine.
Mrs. Weems?
Can you clarify number 3 for me, the limited use of instructional time? How is instructional time being used?
And again, I'll have to turn to the administration to answer that question. I don't know what percentage of instructional time is used for fundraising.
In a fundraiser?
Sure, I'll speak to that. I'll give you an example. So tonight you heard from the American Heart Association, and so one of the things that we do with them is called Jump Rope for Heart.
Okay.
And so Jump Rope for Heart typically we will do during PE instruction. We build that into our PE curriculum. And so it's physical activity. It aligns with our curriculum, but we'll do that during PE instruction. There will be other times when, for a fundraiser, they might have an assembly because part of the fundraiser might be character education, and so they'll come in and they'll do a little bit of the character education piece associated with that. So what we do, and the reason I think, and I'm sure the policy chair could speak to this, that administration recommended limited instructional time, is we want to leave that to the judgment of the principal. And so that's why we asked for that language to not be overly constraining, but at least have language in there that would constrain the principal somewhat.
Okay, thank you.
Is there any other discussion? Okay, the voting board is open. The motion is passed. Next, we do information. Our first information item this evening is about English as a second language program, K through 12.
Good evening, Chairwoman Anderson, Vice Chair McDonald, members of the school board, and Dr. Spence. I'm Stephen Court, a program evaluation specialist in the Office of Research and Evaluation. Tonight, I'll present the English as a Second Language, or ESL, Evaluation Readiness Report, including background information, goals and objectives, and the recommended evaluation plan. Based on School Board Policy 626, the purpose of the Evaluation Readiness Report is to prepare existing programs for evaluation after they are selected for the annual program evaluation schedule. The process includes defining goals and objectives and developing the evaluation plan. The school board approved last year's program evaluation schedule, in which the ESL program was recommended for an evaluation readiness report. Program evaluation staff collaborated with the ESL Evaluation Readiness Committee to develop division-wide goals and measurable objectives along with the evaluation plan. As a brief background, the ESL program prepares English learners to be college and career ready through integrated content-based language instruction. The program aims to develop the conversational and academic English skills of EL students in listening, speaking, reading, and writing as quickly as possible so that they can participate meaningfully in the division's education program. The ESL program aligns with all four of the Compass to 2020 goal areas: high academic expectations, multiple pathways, social emotional development, and culture of growth and excellence. The ESL program is based on standards developed by WIDA, the world-class instructional design and assessment consortium, of which Virginia is a member, along with 38 other U.S. states and territories. Because Virginia is a WIDA member, school divisions use WIDA assessments. Divisions also have access to WIDA professional learning supports and research regarding best practices. During the 2017-18 school year, 1,292 students received ESL services or were in monitoring status as former EL students, which was about 2% of the total student population. Of the EL students, 68% were in elementary grades, 17% were in middle school, and 15% were in high school. Among them, the EL students speak 59 different languages. The evaluation readiness process included a review of national, state, and division documentation associated with the ESL programs, including a review of external research studies and evaluation reports of similar programs elsewhere. Program evaluators met with Department of Teaching and Learning Leadership, the ESL program coordinator, and the Evaluation Readiness Committee to articulate program goals and measurable objectives and to develop the evaluation plan. The Evaluation Readiness Committee consisted of 22 members, including ESL and classroom teachers, administrators and school counselors, executive directors from the Departments of Teaching and Learning, as well as school leadership, and the ESL program coordinator. The first goal is focused on professional learning and collaboration in the ESL program. Specific objectives for this goal call for ESL and classroom teachers to participate in professional learning and to collaborate to meet the needs of EL students. The second goal is that the ESL program will foster EL students' social and emotional development to support students as they become confident learners who feel part of their school community. Specific objectives for EL students are shown on the slide. Examples include EL students demonstrating confidence by participating in class, attending school consistently, and reporting a sense of belonging to the school. The third goal is that the ESL program will be student-centered and provides EL students with a variety of choices and opportunities to help them reach their goals. Specific objectives are that EL students will report that they were provided with personalized learning opportunities, that the academic and career planning process helped them to make informed decisions, that EL students enroll in rigorous coursework and specialized programs, and that they demonstrate college and career readiness skills. The fourth goal is that EL students will attain English proficiency in listening, speaking, reading, and writing. Specific objectives for the fourth goal are that EL students will make adequate progress in English language development each year, achieve English proficiency within 5 years, and graduate from high school on time. The fifth goal is that the parents of EL students will be provided with supports and services to enable them to support and participate in their child's education. Specific objectives are that the parents of EL students receive timely notice of their child's English language progress in a manner that they understand, that parents express satisfaction with events and resources provided for parents to support students, and that parents receive school division communications in a manner they can understand. After completing the evaluation readiness process, a 3-year evaluation of the ESL program is recommended. During its first and second year, the evaluation will focus on the ESL program's implementation processes. Devoting 2 years of focus to implementation will provide an opportunity to address any modifications or changes to the program that occur due to previously planned modifications, changes to federal and/or state regulations, or in response to Year 1 recommendations. In addition, student outcome will be collected. During the third year, the focus of the evaluation will shift to measuring program effectiveness in terms of student outcomes and the degree to which the program met its goals and objectives. This slide outlines the evaluation focus areas for each year, beginning with the program's operational components. These operational components include the criteria and processes for identifying, assessing, and placing EL students according to their language needs, the instructional models and methods used to deliver English development and academic content to the EL students, and the processes for monitoring the progress of the EL students both before and after they attain English proficiency and exit the program. Staffing considerations, as well as resources and professional learning activities, will also be assessed as part of the evaluation. The other evaluation focus areas each year include the characteristics of current and former EL students, the program's progress toward meeting its goals and objectives, stakeholders' perceptions, and the additional cost to the division. Year 3 will include analyses of academic performance data for former EL students and their non-EL peers. This concludes the presentation regarding the evaluation readiness process and the plan for evaluating the English as a Second Language program. At this time, Dr. Kip Rogers, Chief Academic Officer, and I are available to answer any questions you may have.
Do we have any questions, comments? Mrs. Weems?
Thank you. 59 different languages. That's awesome and challenging, though. What do you foresee as part of the support that we're going to give parents? You know, you mentioned that. I mean, do we have anything already in line as far as supporting the parents in order for them to be able to help their students? Dr. Rogers, come on.
Day 7, my knowledge is about this big with regards to what we're doing. I do know that we're making some programmatic changes within the scope of how we provide services to our students that speak second languages, so I'm going to defer to my colleague a bit.
Good evening. As far as support and what we envision, I can tell you already we are providing support with parent outreach, and we do that one per semester. We have a meeting for just parents of English learner students and the additional members of their family, and we focus on topics at those meetings that of information they may need to support their child in a partnership with the school and in providing support at home, whether it be the importance of reading with or to your child, whether it's in the English language or whether it's in their home language. The topics vary because the needs vary at each individual school, but every school in our school system holds a meeting each semester to support whatever it is those parents need at that particular site. Usually it's followed by the students doing some kind of presentation or sharing their work with parents. And so, and that also helps when they know that their children are going to do something. At the end of the meeting, that also helps in bringing them into our schools, because our schools are somewhat intimidating to families that come from outside of this country. The other thing that we are exploring, the Department of Teaching and Learning with the Department of School Leadership, is we're looking at translating additional documents in our school system in our top 3 languages to support our parents with understanding some of our procedures and protocols in the school system.
Okay. All right. Thank you. I've got a couple ideas that I want to discuss with you, but we'll do that throughout this week. Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Rogers. We had to get you up here your first week.
Mrs. Rye.
I'm going to let you get away yet because you said top 3. I think we all know what the number 2 is. What's the what's the third language? You said top 3 languages. What else besides? What are the other languages?
Spanish, Tagalog. The third one is now Chinese Mandarin.
Oh, that's what we needed to know.
It was Vietnamese. It is now Chinese Mandarin.
Interesting. Thank you.
Do we have any other questions or comments? Thank you. Thank you very much. Next, for information, we have the interim financial statements from June through August of 2018. Welcome, Mrs. Pate.
Thank you. Good evening, Chairwoman Anderson, Vice Chairman McDonald, school board members, Dr. Spence. For the fiscal year ending June 30th, 2018, the overall final revenue trend was favorable with an actual over budget amount of approximately $1.4 million. The Commonwealth of Virginia revenue source was our only major revenue stream with an unfavorable trend. However, we did collect 99.9% of that budget with an actual under budget of approximately $233,000. Our March 31st ADM did come in slightly higher than we budgeted. However, the shortfall was a result of certain state revenues which are not budgeted on an ADM basis but are based on actual expenditures throughout the year, and so therefore they came in at a lower amount than what we originally budgeted. The federal government revenue source was favorable with an actual over budget of approximately $414,000. We did have a shortfall of approximately $1.9 million in impact aid fund. This was offset with surpluses in the areas of the Medicaid reimbursements and some other federal revenue fund streams. State sales tax revenue source was favorable as well. An actual over budget for the year of approximately $546,000. You can see in this first graph that 2018 came in approximately $1.2 million higher than 2017. Our other revenue sources were also favorable with an actual over budget of approximately $622,000, due mostly to the actual over budgets in the areas of sales of school vehicles, sales of salvage materials, indirect cost revenue received from grants, and the receipt of some bond premiums from a general obligation and revenue bond refunding done by the city. This next illustration shows you the total revenues by major source in fiscal year 2018. The city contributed 55.2%. The state contributed 33.7%. Sales tax was 9.1%. Federal government was 1.6%, and the other sources were about 1.4%. Our final expenditure trend for 2018 was favorable in all categories. Overall remaining unspent and unencumbered balance was $20.9 million. When you look at the total expenditures incurred in fiscal year 2018 by category illustrated in this next graph, instructional category comprises 69.6%, operation and maintenance is 11.3%, transportation is 5.8%, technology is 5%, admin, attendance, and health is 3%, and debt service is 5.3%. Presented on Schedule B1 of your documents, you will find a summary of the reversion back to the city's general fund, the revenue surplus of approximately $1.4 million, and the remaining unspent unencumbered balance of the $20.9 million, with all adjustments and prepaid items amounted to a reversion back to the city of approximately $22.9 million. This reversion amount includes approximately $448,000 from the Green Run Charter School Fund and approximately $100,000 from the School Athletic Fund. The revenues that comprise the city school board revenue sharing formula on a preliminary basis came in over budget. Our share of that surplus is approximately $1.5 million. So in October, a resolution providing additional details regarding the reversion amount and the results of the revenue sharing formula will be available for board's future consideration for appropriation. So my disclaimer, the revenue sharing formula and these figures are presented unaudited, and they are subject to change. Also in your packet, you do have July and August interim financial statements. They are presented as required by Virginia State Code. However, they are abbreviated statements. There are no salary and benefits in there for 10-month employees. Encumbrances from prior year have not been brought forward during those time frames, and there were other adjustments that were being worked on as we closed the fiscal year. So they may not be as meaningful or as comparable to the financial statements that we presented to the board in September. That concludes the presentation. I'll be glad to address any questions the board may have.
Do we have any questions? Mrs. Manning?
Just one question. You mentioned that the impact aid came in 1.9 million, I think,
Under
less.
budget.
What that we received 1.9 million less?
Less, mhm.
And what was the reason for that?
That would be filing of the federal cards. I'm going to let Farrell address the
Okay.
card issue.
Primarily, our number of military-connected students through our impact aid cards, they came in less than the previous year. That's mirroring our decline in enrollment overall, and so that's the primary reason.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Thank you.
Thank you.
Does anyone have a standing committee report? Mrs. Rye?
So I wanted to share these PRC dates because we got a little out of schedule due to member travel, and in November there was actually a conflict with the annual VSBA conference in Williamsburg. So the Wednesday date is now, the October date is now Wednesday, October 17th at noon. And the November PRC date is Monday, November 19th at 1 o'clock. And just to take us through the end of the year, December stands as was initially reported, Thursday, December 13th, 1 o'clock.
Are there any other standing committee reports? Okay. That concludes the formal part of our meeting this evening. Madam Clerk, do we have any speakers on non-agenda items this evening?